picnic on Paradise, and the first year of the school year, the day before summer vacation began. A wide range of people gathered in front of the student council room, but all of them were dressed in light clothing, with no signs of hostility on their faces. It was a fact that those who opposed the student council and their class representative had already fled. It was also the truth that the students who had not participated in the recent incident were getting ready to leave the academy. It seemed that they were concerned about being involved in any more incidents. This gathering was a combination of those who had no intention of fighting, those who intended to take a neutral position, and those who wanted to support the student council. The most numerous group was probably those who just wanted to observe the situation from a distance and escape if anything happened. The meeting hall was filled with various people, including the first-year students and their guardians, and the second years who had not been involved. In other words, it was a meeting of people who were all related in some way or another to the student council. About what we're about to do, can I ask a question? The person who spoke was a girl with black hair and brown eyes. She wore a simple one-piece dress. She was one of the girls who had been caught in the incident earlier. Yes, what is it? The girl nervously looked at the girl in a wheelchair who had called out to her. That girl's face was covered by her hair, making it difficult for anyone else to see it. What do you think of this? I heard the first-year students would be taking over the student council. What do you think of that? The girl in the wheelchair replied with a voice that was so quiet it could hardly be heard. I don't know, but I believe that this is what should be done. But why would you believe that? The girl looked surprised. Because they were chosen for the position by the people who knew them best, replied the girl in the wheelchair. Her words made the girl even more surprised, and she stared at the girl in the wheelchair for a while. However, it was only for a short moment before she turned back to look at the other girls who had gathered. Hey, Anna! How do you know that? The girl looked around at the other girls surrounding her. I heard that the second years were going to be taking over the student council. Don't you know anything? I am one of those who will be taking over the student council, said a girl standing next to her. She was tall, with black hair and blue eyes. She wore a skirt and a ribbon held back her long hair. She looked very mature, but she also had an innocent and childlike expression on her face. She was like a child playing dress-up in her mother's clothes, but there was also a hint of confidence about her. I will be taking care of things such as dealing with the teachers, maintaining discipline in class, and managing the students. I have no intention of interfering in the day-to-day operations of the student council. That's why you're going to be taking over, Aina? The girl in the wheelchair was astonished. She knew that this girl would become one of the students' representatives, but she had not expected this level of confidence from her. You'll be able to do everything you want, huh? That's right. I will not interfere in your affairs at all, and I will try my best not to be involved in anything related to the student council. I hope that everyone will cooperate with me. No way! You're not going to be involved! Yes. I don't want to get involved with something I'm not familiar with, and I don't have any particular interests in participating in student council activities. That's amazing. The girl in the wheelchair's mouth hung open in surprise, but she also looked happy somehow. Hey, Aina, how did you learn how to be so calm when you don't know what's going on? Because I read books on how to be calm when I don't know what's going on, of course. The girl who had asked the question sighed. She had heard from the girl in the wheelchair that she was calm when she didn't know what was going on because she had read books on it, but she didn't believe that such a thing actually existed. She looked at the girl in the wheelchair and smiled wryly. Well, I guess you have a point. I'll do my best to continue to be calm even if something happens to me. The girl in the wheelchair replied with a smile, which caused the girl to grin back at her. Oh, that's great, but can I ask one more thing? How did you become a student representative? That's simple. I was chosen by the people who knew me best. That's all there is to it. What? The girl in the wheelchair tilted her head quizzically. But I heard that the first years were chosen by the students themselves. Well, that's what they were saying, replied the girl in the wheelchair, looking slightly uncomfortable. But I was chosen by the second years, and all of you were chosen by your guardians, so I think that it's different. The girl who had asked the question laughed. What's the difference? The girl in the wheelchair turned her gaze on the girl who asked the question. I am going to try to understand things that are completely unfamiliar to me as best I can. She smiled, as though she was telling them something funny. However, there was also a hint of loneliness behind her smile. It was as though she was saying that she did not want anyone to get too close to her. The girl in the wheelchair could not understand why the girl seemed lonely. She felt bad for her, but she also thought that perhaps it was because she was lonely herself. Well, it doesn't matter. But are you okay with being chosen by the second years? Won't the first years resent you? Of course. I'll be able to help those girls who have been troubled by various things. I will try my best to be able to support everyone. The girl smiled as she spoke, as if she was looking at something very far away. She sounded like she was talking about a dream, and it made the girl feel a little lonely too. That's why. The girl turned her gaze away from the other girls and looked towards a corner of the meeting hall, where two girls were talking with each other. One was a beautiful girl with long black hair. She had a graceful figure and an elegant expression that suggested that she was not a simple high school student. She was wearing a simple white dress with a red ribbon on it. Her hair was tied up, and she wore gloves that covered her forearms. She was looking towards the other girl, who was wearing a light pink dress. Her hair was tied up with a dark pink ribbon. The girl in the wheelchair had seen this kind of girl before somewhere. The girl who asked the question followed her gaze and saw that the other girl had a pale, unblemished face, which looked like a doll. She had large black eyes that seemed to reflect a deep sadness. Her expression was one of sorrow, as though she was suffering. There were signs that she had been crying recently. She also thought that she might have seen her somewhere before, too. That's right. The girl in the wheelchair was about to say something, but then she remembered something and fell silent. She realized something and turned around to look at the other girls. The girl in the wheelchair smiled at her. It looks like you've noticed it too. The girl in the wheelchair turned back towards the other girls and told them about what she had noticed. You see, she's a vampire. The other girls all looked at the girl in the wheelchair blankly. The girl in the wheelchair laughed at their confused expressions and continued her story. A vampire that's been living secretly among us. The girls in the meeting hall stared at the girl with pale skin and large eyes, and they also turned their gaze to the girl who had brought her to the meeting hall. She's been living as a human. The other girls all gasped at once and turned towards the girl with black hair and brown eyes. The girl who had asked the question was very surprised. So this is... She was looking at the girl with pale skin and large black eyes and asking herself if she had heard correctly. The girl who had asked the question had heard that a vampire had been living at the academy, but she had not thought that it would be this person. Yep, that's her. The girl in the wheelchair smiled at her and nodded. She was already living here before I came here. Well, I guess I can say that she was already living here before you came here, too. Did you know her before? I don't know her name, but she has black hair and... The girl in the wheelchair explained to her companion with a smile, but then she noticed that her companion was no longer next to her and quickly looked around to see what had happened. She saw a man standing there with a face full of anger, and she hurriedly tried to stop him from moving forward towards her. However, he ignored her and grabbed hold of his companion's collar, pulling her backwards and causing her to fall over. The girl with black hair was caught in between them, and her face began to change. Her large eyes turned blood red, and her pale skin began to turn even paler, as though it was covered with a layer of frost. The girl with black hair was transformed into a vampire without a moment's delay. The other students stood still in shock as they watched the spectacle unfold right before their very eyes. However, even if they could not believe it, there were only two girls in the room who could not tell what was happening. Hey! What's happening? I'm not sure either. They looked at each other and began to move together.